Hello, brothers and sisters. Welcome to Dwight's Perspective. On this channel, we discuss subjects from a Christian fundamentalist worldview. Today, we will be continuing our Detestable Authors Series. This is part 3. Detestable author number 3, Diderot. Denis Diderot was a French intellectual, philosopher, and philosopher, and a major organizer and leader of the Enlightenment. A polymath, he contributed in numerous disciplines, including philosophy, literature, and art criticism. A polymath is a person whose expertise spans a significant number of different subject areas. Such a person is known to draw on complex bodies of knowledge to solve specific problems. Think of Leonardo da Vinci. A polymath is a person of that caliber. The French man of letters and encyclopedist was born at Langres, France, on the 5th of October, 1713. Pictured above, in the background, on the right side, is the actual birthplace of Denis Diderot. His parents were Didier Diderot, a cutler, and Angelique Vigneron, who together had 7 children, only 4 of which reached adulthood. Coming from a wealthy and very religious family of craftsmen, and with a canon for an uncle, a priest for a brother, and a nun for a sister, the influence of religion on young Diderot was very strong. It is beyond question that Mr. and Mrs. Diderot were fulfilling their duty as Christian parents, put forth by King David in Psalms 145, verse 4. One generation shall praise thy works to another, and shall declare thy mighty acts. His father was set on Denis one day joining the priesthood, and at 10 years old, he was sent off to the Jesuit school in Langres. At 12, he went through the ceremony of tonsuring, which is the practice of shaving part of one's head, popularly associated with medieval monks. One night, when Denis is 15 years old, his father is surprised to find him all ready to leave for Paris. Although this came as a shock to the craftsman, nevertheless, he travels with him to the capital and enrolls him in the Jesuit college Louis le Gras. And later he attended Jansenist College d'Harcourt as well. After completing his high school studies, Denis Diderot embarked on the study of theology and philosophy at the Sorbonne. But the anti-authority impulse in the youthful Diderot was too strong for him ever to become a priest, and, though he completed the education required for the priesthood, he dropped away before taking final vows. Although he was intended to become a priest, in fact, he decides to become a philosopher. In addition to his anti-authority impulse, the death of his sister, the nun, from reportedly being overworked in the convent, may have affected Diderot's opinion of religion. During this time, his father expected him to study other respectable occupations, such as law or medicine, but Diderot spent his time with books and women instead. When asked what he wanted to do with his life, Diderot is supposed to have replied, "Nothing. Nothing at all. I like to study. I am very happy, very content. I don't ask for anything else." This is the last straw for his father, who, in his disappointment, cuts him off. Diderot is 19 years old at the time. For the next 10 years, Diderot scraped out a living by translating English books, tutoring the children of wealthy families, and worked as a publisher's hack. He also wrote sermons for preachers and missionaries on demand. He had studied theology, after all. He even extorted money from monks by pretending to join their order. He continued to spend his spare time studying and chasing after women. He frequently visited the coffee houses, particularly the Procope, where he befriended Jean-Jacques Rousseau in 1741. We should not be surprised that these two selfish reprobates eventually fell out. Diderot married Antoinette Champion, a devoted Catholic, in 1743. Both their parents disapproved of the marriage, and eventually both Anne and Denis did as well. During this time, Diderot's work testifies to his having gone through a religious crisis, and he progressed relatively slowly from Roman Catholicism to deism and then to atheism and philosophical materialism. As the years went by, their marriage turned sour when his wife said she would not touch a book which did not offer something spiritually uplifting. Diderot's remedy was to read her only the raunchiest novels at the time. No need to get Robert Stack involved to figure out why Antoinette was unhappily married to Denis Diderot. He cheated on her with Mademoiselle Babouti, who would later marry the famous artist Greuze. And feminist activist and author, third-rate scribbler really, Madeleine de Puisieux. Also, Sophie Volland and her sister Uraine, who were in an incestuous lesbian relationship with each other, so technically a threesome. And finally, his deceased friend de Milleville's lover, who married a lawyer at age 12, Madame de Monks. While on the subject of raunchy books, let's discuss his novel, The Indiscreet Jewels. This would be a good time to ask the kids to leave the room. Things are going to get a little R-rated. Diderot was 34 and also working on the Encyclopédie when he published, illegally and anonymously, this immoral, pornographic piece of, quote, literature. The novel is set in the Congo in the year 1,500,000,3,200,001 and is about a sultan and his magical ring. The sultan, who has no affection towards his wife, instead bestows all his love and attention on his mistress, just as Diderot was doing at the time. One day he confesses he is bored. He suspects the ladies of his court are up to all sorts of romantic intrigues, and he would love to hear the details, but he knows they'll never be honest about such things. His mistress suggests that the genie Kukufa may have a way to learn their secrets. The Sultan summons Kukufa with a clap. The genie appears and, on hearing the Sultan's request, presents him with a magical ring. It can make the wearer invisible and take him instantly to any place he wants to go. But more importantly, when pointed in the direction of a woman and turned a particular way, it can make the lady's jewel speak. And her jewel, her vagina, will always speak the truth about its experiences. The Sultan wastes no time putting the ring to the test, both in public and in private. But even he is shocked by what he hears. The Sultan even at one point used the ring on a horse. Without getting into great detail about the conversation had with the women's jewels, Due to the lewdness, misogyny, and acts of objectifying women, the book ends with the women fleeing the city and salesmen trying to sell muzzles for vaginas to the women. While in today's degenerate society, this book would have been celebrated and turned into a Hollywood blockbuster, probably making millions of dollars. But in 1740s France, he was accused of indecency and promptly thrown in jail for many months. Subjected to police interrogation, Diderot first denied any wrongdoing. And then, on August 11th, 1750, broke down and confessed his role, but laid most blame on his mistress, Madame de Puisieux, the feminist activist, forcing him to write the book to pay a debt he owed her. Somehow he got out of jail, probably through his connection with Voltaire and the distributors of the Encyclopédie, to continue his work on the project. Like his compatriot Voltaire, Diderot also tended to silence Christian critics via the courts, making him a precursor to the cancel culture. He is best known for editing the Encyclopédie, the great multi-volume French language encyclopedia of scientific and social knowledge. He worked on it from 1748 to 1772, arranging for many of France's greatest experts to contribute to a comprehensive overview of knowledge at a very high level, much higher than today's well-known encyclopedias. A few of the major contributors were French mathematician Jean-Laurent d'Alembert. He was editor. He contributed to science, especially mathematics, contemporary affairs, philosophy, religion, among others. French veterinary surgeon Claude Bourgelat. He contributed to Menage, which is the art of training and riding horses and horsemanship, and Farrier, a craftsman who trims and shoes horses' hooves. French publisher André Le Breton. He was the chief publisher, and he wrote an article on printer's ink. French naturalist and anatomist Louis Jean-Marie Dubotin. He contributed to natural history. And of course, French philosopher, art critic, and writer himself, Denis Diderot. He was the chief editor. He did articles on economics, mechanical arts, philosophy, politics, religion, among others. French-German philosopher and writer Baron d'Holbach. He contributed to science, chemistry and mineralogy, politics, religion, among others. French scholar and philosopher Chevalier Louis de Jaucourt. He contributed to economics, literature, medicine, politics, bookbinding, among others. He wrote about 18,000 articles, which is about a third of the whole volumes. French economist and author André Morellet. He contributed to theology, philosophy. French judge, man of letters, historian, and political philosopher Montesquieu. He contributed to part of the article Gout, Taste. He died before he was able to complete it. French economist and physician Francois Quesnay. He did articles on tax farmers, articles on grain. Genevan philosopher, writer, and composer Jean-Jacques Rousseau, music, political theory, French economist and statesman, and Robert Jacques Turgot, economics, etymology, philosophy, physics. French Enlightenment writer, historian, and philosopher Voltaire, history, literature, philosophy. Due to the controversial nature of some of the articles, several of its editors were sent to jail. There was also evidence to suggest the encyclopedia was written specifically as a means to subtly demean and ultimately destroy Christianity. We'll have more on that in a later video. As a philosopher, Diderot speculated on free will and held a completely materialistic view of the universe. He suggested that all human behavior is determined by heredity. He therefore warned his fellow philosophers against an overemphasis on mathematics and against the blind optimism that sees in the growth of physical knowledge and automatic social and human progress. He rejected the idea of progress. The idea of progress means that civilization has moved, is moving, and will move in a desirable direction. In his opinion, the aim of explaining the universe through geometry was doomed to fail. Therefore, he founded his philosophy on experiment and the study of probabilities. He wrote several articles and supplements concerning gambling, mortality rates, and inoculation against smallpox for the encyclopedia. There, he discreetly but firmly refuted D'Alembert's technical errors and personal positions on probability. Diderot was an atheist, even among his contemporaries, and advocated alongside Voltaire the overthrow of religion. In particular, he once stated that he wanted to live long enough to, quote, see the last king strangled by the entrails of the last priest, end quote, thus implying that he wanted to see both the monarchy and Christianity violently destroyed. He wrote extensively on the theater. His understanding of the classical theater is categorized by audience stage separation, orientation to the universal spectator, and stress on the aesthetics of the theater coming from the actors and the playwright. Diderot's famous work, Le Neveu de Rameau, or Rameau's Nephew, 1805, was published posthumously, or after his death. A satire of Diderot's society and era, the work was the first bourgeois novel and exemplified Diderot's theory that art must embody a moral point of view. In 1772 through 74, Empress Catherine the Great of Russia brought him to St. Petersburg, where his ideas had enormous influence. In turn, the experience in a strange land broadened his outlook as well. In the last few years of his life, Diderot became very fond of his food and on occasion was known to commit gluttony. One evening in 1784, as Diderot dined with his wife, he reportedly reached for an apricot with which to conclude his meal. His wife, concerned for his health, scolded him for eating too much, and he replied, "But what the devil do you think that will do to me?" Diderot died just moments after eating the fruit, and we can picture his wife trying to prevent herself from shouting out, "I told you so." You might expect this to be the end of the story, but it's not. On August 1st, 1784, Diderot's lifeless body was buried in the Chapel of the Virgin, deep in the nave of Church of St. Roch. Diderot laid undisturbed in the enormous church until the last year of the French Revolution, at which point grave robbers opened his tomb, stole his lead-encased coffin, and dumped his remains onto the marble floor. The next day, what was left of his remains and others, presumably, were swept up together and transferred to one of the city's mass graves. And as for his soul, well, let's just say he was reunited with his anti-Christian friends, Voltaire and Rousseau, far away from the God he spent his life attacking. Diderot knew the truth, yet chose eternal damnation over eternal happiness. For it had been better for them not to have known the way of righteousness, than, after they have known it, to turn from the holy commandment delivered unto them. 2 Peter 2:21. The smoke of their torment ascendeth up forever and ever, and they have no rest, day nor night. Revelation 14:11. After his death, many of his venomous writings contributed to the thinking of many atheistic superstars. His essay, Letter on the Blind, which also contributed to his imprisonment in 1749, explored natural selection before Darwin. The Oedipus complex, the sexual desire for a parent of the opposite sex, was discussed in Diderot's book, Rameau's Nephew, before Sigmund Freud coined the theory. And D'Alembert's Dream by Diderot spoke about genetic manipulation long before Sir Ian Wilmot cloned the first sheep. Not to mention Karl Marx cited him as his favorite author, twice. There's a war going on, and I'm not talking about Zelensky and Putin. It's much more ancient than that, and involves the souls of each and every human being that has ever lived throughout history. Make sure you're fighting on the right side, or they'll be hell to pay. Diderot sealed his fate hundreds of years ago and has an eternity to suffer his reward. But if you are watching this video, there's still time for you to change the road you're on. Seek Jesus today. He will never leave you nor forsake you. And as always, thank you, brothers and sisters, for watching. Until next time, God bless.